The Atlantic Ocean in 1942 was not merely a vast expanse of water, it was the most vital and bloody battlefield of the Second World War. Every week, massive convoys of Allied ships, laden with food, fuel, and vital war materials, risked the perilous crossing from North America to sustain a beleaguered Great Britain. This lifeline was constantly stalked by the lethal German U-boats, Adolf Hitler's dreaded Grey Wolves of the Kriegsmarine. Their mission was simple: sever the supply line, starve Britain into submission, and choke the Allied war effort before it could even begin. The stakes could not have been higher, as the very survival of the United Kingdom depended on the safe passage of these convoys across the brutal ocean. These submarines were the apex predators of the sea, operating in coordinated wolfpacks that could overwhelm any defense force in the depths of the night. The battle raged in a desperate cycle of attack and defense, a constant struggle for nautical dominance in which every sunken ship was a step closer to Allied defeat. Allied Naval Command desperately searched for an advantage, a glimmer of insight into the invisible enemy that struck without warning and melted back into the deep. The only way to win this crucial battle was to know where the U-boats were going to be before they even got there. Intelligence became the new weapon, a silent and strategic tool more powerful than any torpedo or depth charge. For Britain, this meant a race against time to unravel the secrets of the sophisticated German encryption system that shielded the movements of every single U-boat at sea. Without this intelligence advantage, the relentless tide of sinking merchant ships threatened to drown the entire Allied cause beneath the cold, unforgiving waves of the Atlantic. The ultimate key to survival lay not in the strength of their hulls but in the brilliance of their minds, hidden far from the sound of ocean warfare. At the core of the Kriegsmarine's seemingly unbreakable security stood the Enigma machine, a portable device that was the height of 1930s electromechanical encryption technology. German High Command believed implicitly in the Enigma's complexity, convinced that the sheer number of possible settings made any code-breaking attempt computationally impossible. The machine used a series of 3, and later 4, interchangeable rotors, a plugboard that rewired the electrical current, and a reflector that sent the current back through the system. This combination meant that for every keystroke, the letter substitution was entirely different, creating a cipher that changed constantly and unpredictably. To the German naval commanders, especially the U-boat Admiral Karl Donitz, the Enigma system provided an impenetrable wall of secrecy for their crucial operational orders. Every U-boat position report, every command to attack a convoy, and every vital movement was transmitted in a stream of seemingly random letters. They communicated with an air of total assurance, sometimes even inserting casual jokes and personal messages into their encrypted traffic, confident that no enemy ear could ever understand their coded secrets. This deep-seated institutional arrogance became a crucial weakness, as their belief in the machine's perfection led them to become complacent about operational security. Their internal mocking of the Allied intelligence capability was both a reflection of their faith in Enigma and a psychological reinforcement of their absolute superiority at sea. They considered the British to be mere bunglers in the dark, incapable of solving the mathematical puzzle presented by their cryptographic genius. The confidence was so high that they rarely considered the possibility of compromise, which allowed Bletchley Park to find the very chinks in the armor they believed was flawless. This perfect German secrecy allowed the U-boats to operate with devastating impunity, knowing their plans were shielded from all prying eyes. The Enigma machine was more than just a piece of hardware, it was a symbol of their strategic advantage, an iron curtain of cryptography protecting the Grey Wolves of the Atlantic. Far away from the harsh reality of the Atlantic struggle, behind the seemingly innocuous facade of a Victorian manor house, lay Bletchley Park, the secret heart of the British code-breaking effort. Here, a brilliant and eccentric collection of mathematicians, linguists, engineers, and chess masters had been quietly assembled to undertake the seemingly impossible task of decrypting the Enigma. They were the hidden army, fighting a war of pure intellect against the formidable might of the German encryption machine. The key to their success was not just genius but also the development of revolutionary machines, most famously the electromechanical bomb designed by Alan Turing. These massive, complex devices were essentially code-breaking computers, designed to systematically test every possible rotor setting and plugboard combination on a massive industrial scale. The early work involved meticulous manual labor, cross-referencing and statistical analysis known as cribs, where analysts guessed small portions of the original German plaintext. The daily ritual was a grueling, high-pressure race against the clock, as the Bletchley team knew the German settings would change at midnight, resetting the cipher to a new, terrifying complexity. Every scrap of intercepted German radio traffic was rushed to the park for immediate processing, forming the raw material for their cryptographic assaults. The work was carried out in absolute secrecy, with analysts often unaware of the incredible global significance of the tiny pieces of code they worked on every day. Their effort produced the ultra-intelligence, which gave the Allied command an unprecedented, real-time look into the innermost plans of the German military. This human and mechanical endeavor was a true testament to interdisciplinary collaboration, proving that abstract mathematical thinking could defeat the most sophisticated physical barrier. For a time, the efforts of this hidden army granted the convoys an almost invisible shield, guiding them around the deadliest U-boat Wolfpacks and saving thousands of lives and millions of tons of cargo. Bletchley Park was the place where the war was fought not with bullets and bombs but with the relentless application of logic and the power of pure mathematics. The initial naval Enigma traffic, utilizing a three-rotor configuration, was gradually yielding its secrets to the relentless pressure from the cryptographers at Bletchley Park. Early in the Battle of the Atlantic, the British found small but critical footholds, leveraging the machine's operational flaws and the occasional lazy practices of German radio operators. One of the most vital early sources of success came not from pure mathematics but from daring acts of naval espionage and salvage at sea. The capture of key materials, including codebooks and, most importantly, fully wired Enigma machines from captured or sunken U-boats, provided crucial shortcuts. These captures gave Bletchley Park the necessary keys to confirm their breaking methods and significantly accelerate the decryption process. The success of the decrypts meant that the British could often reroute convoys completely, guiding them away from a waiting Wolfpack, a tactic that became known as wigwam. The resulting intelligence, code-named Ultra, transformed the Admiralty's perspective on the war at sea, offering a foresight that no navy in history had ever possessed. The German U-boat commanders grew increasingly perplexed, noticing that convoys seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to avoid their ambush positions time and time again. They dismissed these near misses as mere luck or a coincidence of bad weather, never suspecting that their communications were being read in real time. This initial period of code-breaking victory was an uneasy and fragile peace, a temporary advantage built on the small vulnerabilities of the current German cipher system. The code breakers knew that their success was precarious and that the German technical intelligence was constantly looking for ways to enhance the Enigma's security. They raced to exploit every last weakness before the expected and inevitable upgrade that would close the temporary window of opportunity they were so diligently exploiting. This early triumph demonstrated that the German machine was not invincible but merely a complex puzzle that, with enough ingenuity and raw determination, could indeed be solved. The fleeting moment of cryptographic superiority was a necessary precursor to the deep crisis that would soon engulf the Atlantic theater of operations. The fragile period of Allied dominance came to an abrupt and terrifying end in February 1942, plunging the Battle of the Atlantic into its darkest phase. The Kriegsmarine, realizing the possibility of compromise, introduced a formidable upgrade to their naval Enigma network, specifically for the crucial U-boat communications. This new machine, internally codenamed Triton by the Germans and later known as Sharks by Bletchley Park, added a fourth rotor to the complex cipher system. This single addition geometrically increased the number of possible settings, multiplying the cryptographic problem a staggering 26-fold. The effect on Bletchley Park was instantaneous and devastating. The code breakers, whose methods were built on the three-rotor architecture, were suddenly deaf. All the existing bomb machines, the painstakingly developed cribs, and the accumulated knowledge were rendered useless overnight by the introduction of the new hardware. The once vital stream of ultra-intelligence, which had been the Allied Navy's eyes and ears, dried up completely, leaving the convoys blind in the vast, hostile ocean. This period of cryptographic silence became known simply as the blackout or the gap, a terrifying span of 10 months where German U-boats regained total anonymity. The German commanders, now protected by a system they considered truly impenetrable, once again communicated with supreme confidence and tactical freedom. Admiral Donitz was able to deploy his Wolfpacks with impunity, setting up deadly ambushes that the British had no way of predicting or evading. The U-boats were now operating with a chilling efficiency, striking convoys with devastating speed and precision, then vanishing into the ocean depths before a response could be mounted. The psychological impact on the Allied sailors was immense, as they returned to a state of constant, unpredictable fear, battling an enemy they could neither see nor anticipate. The terrifying knowledge that the enemy knew exactly where they were, while they knew nothing of the enemy, cast a long and chilling shadow over the North Atlantic. Protected by the seemingly impregnable four-rotor Enigma, the U-boat fleet entered its golden age, and the German Navy's confidence soared to new, dangerous heights. Admiral Donitz and his men were so certain of their encryption's perfection that their radio communications were often laced with a casual, almost arrogant dismissiveness toward the enemy. They would frequently mock the British efforts, sometimes even taunting them within the encrypted messages that they assumed were secure from any hostile comprehension. This ingrained arrogance was not just psychological posturing, it was an operational vulnerability that would eventually be exploited by the watchful eyes at Bletchley Park. The Germans were transmitting a vast and regular volume of traffic, including weather reports, logistical details, and personnel chatter, all vital clues for the code breakers. Had the Kriegsmarine exercised greater radio discipline and maintained a more professional, less boastful tone, the code-breaking challenge would have been significantly harder. Their internal correspondence often reflected a certainty of victory, a conviction that the technical superiority of the Enigma would ensure the defeat of the British supply lines. The U-boat commanders felt a sense of invulnerability, operating on the surface at night to reload torpedoes and communicate freely without fear of interception. The mocking tone in their encrypted messages served to underline the frustration felt by the British, who could intercept the signals but not understand a single word. This period was a catastrophic time for the Allies, symbolized by the massive loss of cargo ships, referred to grimly by the U-boat crews as the happy time. The Germans believed their four-rotor machine had created an unbreachable fortress of communication, a delusion that masked the inherent human element of complacency. The sheer volume of their traffic, driven by their operational confidence, provided Bletchley Park with the statistical material they desperately needed to begin their slow, painful attack on the new cipher. The irony was that the more the Kriegsmarine communicated its arrogance, the more it unwittingly provided the keys for its own eventual downfall. The 10-month period of the Enigma blackout was a true crisis point in the Battle of the Atlantic, bringing the Allied war effort perilously close to utter collapse. Between February and December 1942, the monthly tonnage of Allied shipping lost to U-boat attacks skyrocketed to unsustainable levels. The Allied command was reduced to guesswork, having to deploy convoys and escorts based on vague intelligence from high-frequency direction finding, HFDF, or HFDUF, not on certain knowledge. The inability to predict U-boat concentrations meant that Wolfpacks were able to achieve total surprise, often sinking multiple ships in a single coordinated, brutal night attack. Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself would later state that the only thing that truly frightened him during the war was the U-boat menace. The supply situation in Britain became dire, with rations tightening and the strategic reserves of fuel and munitions dwindling dangerously low. The devastating losses were not merely statistical, they represented the deaths of thousands of merchant sailors and naval personnel who bravely sailed into the code-induced darkness. Naval officers on convoy duty felt a crushing sense of impotence, knowing they were fighting an invisible, ubiquitous enemy that seemed to have the advantage of time and location. The desperation led to a massive increase in anti-submarine warfare research, pouring resources into new radar, sonar, and weapon technologies, but intelligence remained the missing link. The crisis profoundly impacted the overall strategic planning of the war, as American troop movements and material shipments essential for the European invasion were significantly delayed. The German U-boats became the single most effective weapon of the Axis, fulfilling their purpose of strangling the Allied ability to project power across the ocean. Bletchley Park, feeling the weight of the global crisis, redoubled its efforts, knowing that the battle being fought on their desks was directly connected to the survival of the convoys at sea. This was a time of immense pressure and near-fatal strategic disadvantage, a low point that underscored the critical necessity of cryptographic mastery to the war's ultimate outcome. The challenge of the four-rotor Enigma was not merely technical, it was a conceptual problem that required an entirely new approach and a massive escalation of mechanical power. The existing bomb machines were simply incapable of searching the astronomically increased number of permutations introduced by the new rotor. Mathematicians like Alan Turing and his colleagues at Bletchley Park had to entirely redesign the code-breaking architecture, moving from the three-rotor model to a more complex, four-rotor bomb. This massive engineering effort took months of intense, highly secretive work, requiring new hardware, new electrical wiring, and a total rethinking of the search strategy. However, the key to the final solution was recognized to be, once again, the physical material of the machine itself, the specific wiring of the new fourth rotor. The British Navy understood that the cryptographic solution had to be found outside the walls of Bletchley Park, on the high seas, through a direct confrontation with the enemy. A desperate, high-stakes military operation was launched to actively seek out and capture an intact U-boat or, at the very least, one of the new fourth-rotor Enigma machines and its associated settings keys. The objective was not just to sink the enemy but to recover the technical intelligence, a riskier and far more complicated goal than a simple naval engagement. Naval vessels were specifically instructed to prioritize the capture of code equipment over the destruction of the U-boat, even at immense personal risk to the boarding crews. This hunt for the key was a chilling recognition that the battle's momentum had shifted decisively to the hands of the code breakers, who needed physical evidence to succeed. The entire Allied military machine was now geared toward this single, covert intelligence goal, proving how the fate of the war hinged upon a single, small piece of captured equipment. Every sighting of a vulnerable U-boat, every close-quarters engagement, now carried the heavy burden of being the moment that could save the entire Battle of the Atlantic. The code breakers waited anxiously, knowing that their theoretical work was paralyzed until the sailors delivered the crucial, tangible evidence from the depths of the ocean. The turning point in the silent war of decryption was a moment of extraordinary naval bravery and immense good fortune that occurred in the mid-Atlantic. The most famous and vital capture involved U-110, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp, which was depth-charged and forced to surface by British destroyers in May 1941. In the ensuing chaos, Lemp mistakenly believed the U-boat was sinking and ordered the crew to abandon ship, neglecting the standard protocol to scuttle the vessel and destroy all confidential material. Before the U-boat could sink, a quick-thinking boarding party from HMS Bulldog managed to latch onto the disabled submarine and successfully enter the vessel. They worked with desperate speed in the flooded and tilting control room to retrieve the most prized artifacts of the entire war, a 4-rotor Enigma machine and the crucial current-setting documents. The documents, including the short signal settings and the monthly code sheets, were the Rosetta Stone that Bletchley Park had been waiting for since the onset of the blackout. Crucially, the capture was kept a complete and utter secret from the Germans, who simply assumed U-110 had been sunk with all hands and its cryptographic secrets destroyed. This silence was paramount, allowing the British to begin reading the new U-boat traffic without the Germans realizing their most vital communications had been compromised. Other later captures, such as those from U-559 by HMS Petard in October 1942, provided reinforcing material, especially the essential Wetterkursschlüssel weather code book, which was the final critical piece of the puzzle. These acts were more significant than sinking battleships, as they armed the cryptographers with the foundational knowledge of the new rotor's wiring and daily settings. The intelligence gained from these heroic and risky boardings closed the terrifying blackout gap and signaled the definitive shift in the entire Battle of the Atlantic. The material was rushed back to Bletchley Park, providing the necessary mathematical and structural input for the newly designed 4-rotor bombers to finally crack the Shark's cipher. The captured Enigma materials finally arrived at Bletchley Park, ushering in a period of intense, focused, and ultimately triumphant decryption. The code breakers could now combine their immense theoretical knowledge with the physical reality of the 4-rotor wiring, a combination that proved instantly effective. The new, much larger bombers, built specifically to tackle the increased permutations, began to whir into action, processing the daily U-boat traffic with unprecedented speed. The success was not immediate or effortless, but the foundation was now secure, and the systematic work of breaking the German naval codes could resume in earnest. The key breakthrough came when the cryptographers were able to use the captured Wetterkursschlüssel weather code to establish daily cribs for the bomb attacks. Since the Germans had to transmit regular, standardized weather reports, the analysts could guess the plaintext of these messages and, from there, deduce the daily Enigma settings. By late 1942, the stream of ultra-intelligence concerning the U-boats was not just restored, it was flowing with greater accuracy and speed than ever before. The Allied commanders were once again privy to the specific patrol lines, the intended targets, and the rendezvous points of the Wolfpacks. This intelligence allowed the Admiralty to perform a tactical masterpiece, not only diverting convoys but also setting up deadly ambushes of their own. They could now bait the U-boats into areas where overwhelming air and surface support was waiting, turning the hunters into the hunted with devastating efficiency. The success of Bletchley Park's renewed efforts utterly vindicated the massive investment in cryptanalysis and demonstrated the profound strategic advantage of electronic intelligence. The ability to read the mind of the enemy on a daily basis was the single most decisive factor in securing victory in the longest and arguably most important campaign of the war. The silent return to cryptographic dominance meant that the clock was finally ticking for the German U-boat fleet in the unforgiving waters of the North Atlantic. With the U-boat Enigma cipher broken and ultra-intelligence flowing freely, the strategic balance of the Battle of the Atlantic tilted violently and definitively in favor of the Allies. The sudden and unexplained disappearance of dozens of U-boats became the grim hallmark of this new, code-driven phase of the conflict. British forces, guided by the precise locations and movement orders decrypted at Bletchley Park, no longer needed to search the entire ocean for their prey. Instead, they were directed with surgical precision to the exact ambush point, where waiting destroyers and long-range aircraft could deliver a swift and fatal attack. These U-boats, so recently arrogant and confident in their secrecy, were now being sunk with an unnerving lack of warning, often vanishing from the airwaves without sending a single distress signal. The German command could not understand the catastrophic and sudden decline in their operational success, nor the eerie accuracy of the Allied counterattacks. The captains of the U-boat simply began to fail to report, their last communications a testament to their continued, mistaken belief in the security of the Enigma. Admiral Donitz and his staff initially blamed the losses on improved Allied radar technology or the increased range of anti-submarine aircraft, never the compromise of their own cipher machine. The British took extreme measures to protect the secret of Ultra, often fabricating cover stories for the intelligence, ensuring the Germans would continue to trust their Enigma. For example, a convoy would be discovered by a scouting aircraft that happened to be in the area, rather than being guided by a code decrypt. This disciplined intelligence deception was as crucial to victory as the decryption itself, maintaining the German technical complacency for the rest of the war. The U-boat commanders were left to grapple with a terrifying new reality: the ocean, once their domain of shadowy operation, had become a graveyard where the unseen enemy knew their every move. The silent sinking of the Grey Wolves was the ultimate and brutal proof that the pen of the cryptographer had finally proven mightier than the sword of the torpedo. The triumph over the naval Enigma was a decisive turning point in the Second World War, a victory secured by intellect and innovation rather than pure firepower. Historians widely agree that the intelligence provided by Bletchley Park shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving countless thousands of military and civilian lives. The cryptographic breakthroughs achieved by Alan Turing and his colleagues laid the foundational groundwork for modern computer science, ushering in the digital age. The bomb machine was an electromechanical ancestor of the digital computer, demonstrating the power of automated calculation to solve complex, real-world problems. The unwavering secrecy surrounding Bletchley Park and the ultra-intelligence was maintained for decades after the war, with the cryptographers bound to silence until the 1970s. This decades-long silence meant that the true heroes of the Battle of the Atlantic, the men and women who fought the war of numbers, were denied their deserved recognition for their lifetime. Their achievement serves as a powerful testament to the necessity of interdisciplinary thinking, bringing together mathematics, engineering, and linguistics to overcome a monumental military obstacle. The story of the Kriegsmarine's arrogant overconfidence being met by the quiet, relentless determination of British code-breaking remains a classic narrative of technological warfare. The German Navy's deep institutional belief in the technological infallibility of the Enigma machine ultimately proved to be their most fatal strategic error. The Battle of the Atlantic was ultimately won not just by ships and sailors but by the power of information, the ability to read the enemy's mind before they had even acted. The legacy of Bletchley Park is one of quiet, unassuming genius that fundamentally altered the course of human history and secured victory for the Allied nations. The grey wolves of the Atlantic were silenced, not by superior might alone, but by the ultimate power of a brilliant, persistent, and entirely secret solution.